Thank you, Ambassador Sibyl, Ambassador Surendra Kumar, and my fellow panelists. I think most of you have already said whatever has to be said, and therefore, in the typical Indian fashion, I am going to bring about a synthesis between the two sides. Because I think that certainly the world is undergoing enormous changes. It's in a process, it's in a period of what I would call a fundamental transformation. The rise of China, the rise of other countries economically, such as India, Brazil, Indonesia, and so on, is also very much a part of this period. If the lesson of the first part of the 20th century was that countries sought to grow at the cost of each other and ended up in the killing fields of two world wars, then the lessons of the latter part of the 20th century really are that countries can grow together and that it's not essential to see development and prosperity as a zero-sum game. In the 21st century, we are seeing far more interconnectedness between countries. You have globalization on an unprecedented scale, which is bringing countries together through trade and investment. You have the communications revolution, so that events occur in any particular country and are felt with absolute immediacy in the furthest corners of the world. So that's part of the phenomenon of globalization. And at the same time, you have growing interdependence. So what you have today is a world in which the hegemon, that is the US, is not really enjoying the kind of hegemonic power that it once had, with complete supremacy in the political, economic, military, and cultural domains. But on the other hand, you don't have any kind of established order which has come to replace it. So the existing situation is characterized by enormous duality and fluidity, and it is in this environment within which India will have to craft its diplomacy. For India, if we look at our diplomacy as an element of our national interest, then how do we define our national interest today? And I think, put very simply, our national interest would be to sustain high levels of growth for the next decade and beyond, and to ensure through selective government intervention that opportunities are available to all sections of our people and not just to a few. So if this is our primary national objective, and we may pursue it with varying degrees of effectiveness, confusion, muddle-headedness, in the way that India usually does. We normally never go about anything in a straight and linear fashion. We are always able to take 2 steps back and 1 step forward. And I think that is going to be precisely how we pursue this objective. Then I think peace in our immediate vicinity and in our extended neighborhood and globally becomes very important as an element within which we can optimally pursue policies which favor our goal of national development. There is, of course, a given environment which we face, which is strategically vulnerable and which has elements of both contention as well as cooperation. This duality in the relationship with, say, China is visible in terms of how India and China have sought to broaden their relationship have, trade, investment, and so on, cultural exchanges. Also, in terms of how India and China are cooperating globally. And why are they cooperating globally? Because both countries, in a sense, have similar objectives vis-a-vis national development. And even though China is ahead in terms of development, it still is a large developing country, just like India, with the potential to emerge as a middle-income country in the years to come. And therefore, for both India and China, the way that we approach global issues is similar, whether it is climate change, whether it is other issues on which, say, issues of technology, where we have similar interests and we do work together on these interests. At the same time, we have an undefined border with China, and our years and years and years of negotiation with China on the issue have not really yielded the kind of results towards a border settlement that we would have hoped the two countries would have been able to find by now. What we do have are, two sets of agreements. One is the principles that should guide a boundary settlement. That's on the longer question of negotiating a boundary settlement. And in the meanwhile, an agreement for maintaining peace and tranquility in the border areas. Given that the line of actual control is not defined, there are incursions. The Ministry of Defense has said 600 have occurred in the last 3 years. No shots have been fired. But at the same time, this is a gray area with potential for tension between the two countries, which we need to address. So it's a mixed picture. On the trade front too, while China is our largest trading partner in goods, we have a huge trade deficit with China, and we supply mainly raw materials, while China exports industrial finished goods. So a complex relationship, one which has certainly elements of competition, but also elements of cooperation, and one in which we would like to see more clearly China's articulation that it attaches importance to its relations with India, reflected more substantially in its behavior on the ground vis-a-vis India, which can give rise to questions about China's policy vis-a-vis us. With Pakistan, again, we have sought to reduce tensions. We've sought to build confidence between the two countries. I think the process has been limited by Pakistan's own internal difficulties and their inability, in a sense, to redefine their security paradigm, which, along with a democratic transition, as Varun mentioned, would be the key to Pakistan's long-term health and stability. Because this policy of what I call strategic overreach, in a sense, has drained away resources in Pakistan, has caused it to become indebted in a way which is going to affect future generations, and has caused it to lose control over its own destiny, because it has provided a fillip to extremist groups in pursuit of this policy. But that policy itself is what is actually sinking Pakistan. So in some way, Pakistan has to really rethink its strategic paradigm. And we, from our point of view, have stressed to the Pakistanis that in Afghanistan and within our region, we don't look on Afghanistan as a center of regional or global competition. Indeed, we see that it has the potential to emerge as a trade and transit hub between Central Asia and South Asia, and an energy hub as well between Central Asia and South Asia. Of course, we are discussing some pipeline projects with Pakistan. Progress, I think, has been fitful on most of these, but they're on the agenda. And what is of interest today is that all the Pakistani parties have actually said that they are seeking better relations with India. Some more categorically, like Nawaz Sharif's party, which in its agenda has said that it will provide transit and so on. So they've made more categorical statements, others a little more ambiguous. But India is not an issue in their election. Now, does this mean that this is going to translate into a political change of policy? You can't say, because the Pakistani deep state still exercises control over security policy and policy towards Afghanistan and India. And therefore, whether it will permit normal development aspirations to prevail over security aspirations, or their security overreach, will be an important question in the future. For the US, certainly it's a very important player in Asia, a balancer to China in Asia, but at the same time, US relations with China also reflect this duality of both competition and cooperation. It's not a policy of containment. Even the pivot or the rebalancing towards Asia that has been announced, over which, of course, we are not sure how the US will proceed under the new administration. But you, at the same time, have such enormous interconnectedness economically and trade-wise and between China and the US, that the Financial Times at one time described this as the new financial balance of terror, because China needs the US market and it's also holding US Treasury bonds in a very large numbers. So here again, I think for India, we have to navigate in this very fluid situation where you have a transformation which is taking place in the diffusion of global power. You have the rise of a major power in Asia, which also shares a border with India. And at the same time, you have to build relations going beyond your immediate neighborhood. So I would say that India has to pursue both policies. It has to pursue policies of engagement with countries like the United States, with which it shares a commonality of interests in many areas, including terrorism, including stabilization of Afghanistan, and so on, including maintaining the safety of sea lines of communication. These are convergent interests which India and the United States share. And we should not shy away from pursuing these congruent or convergent interests with the United States, because it is in India's interest to do so. We have to see it from our own perspective. And I think both the possibilities as well as the limits from India's point of view of engaging with the US with regard to their policies towards Asia need to be very candidly explored between the two countries. At the same time, India has to try for openings with both China and Pakistan, maybe with limited success or more success, and we have to see where Again, we can find convergent interests on which we can build. Climate change, US, India, China, energy. China and India have similar views. US could be a major source of technology, green technology to India and China. Energy, common interest in maintaining sea lines of communication, open, perhaps in developing the energy reserves of Central Asia, trade and investment, and so on. So there are areas where we could possibly work together, but there are also areas of competition. And for this, I think India would need to build its own capacities, militarily, strategically, economically, because of the nature of global patterns of relationship which are in a state of flux. I think the reliability of any one relationship might be open to doubt at points of time. So I think for India, we have to navigate in this kind of a very fluid international situation with emphasis on our own national strength and development, fixing our own internal problems of governance, with building relations with countries like the US or Japan or Vietnam or Indonesia, where we might have congruent interests, managing our relations with China and exploring points of common interest or shared interest, and with Pakistan continuing the dialogue, but not necessarily pushing it, because they have to, in some sense, come to grips with their own internal dynamics. And that is best helped without India being a factor in their internal dynamics. So I would end with that. Thank you.